Four of the city's most powerful men tried to win her heart, and failed. Sierra Vale, CEO, icon, and ice queen to some, wasn't looking for love, especially not from men who thought money, charm, or status could buy her. She'd mastered solitude, commanded respect, and built an empire brick by brick. But everything changed the day a quiet coffee boy walked into her office with the perfect latte and one sentence that unraveled everything. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The late autumn sun filtered through the glass facade of the Vale Fashion headquarters, painting streaks of gold across marble floors and sleek office walls. From her corner suite on the 34th floor, Sierra Vale stood like a goddess carved from steel and grace, back straight, eyes focused, and lips painted the color of blood and certainty. The world saw a woman who had it all. A visionary, a self-made powerhouse. But behind her cool elegance, Sierra carried a weight few understood. The burden of constant expectations, shallow admiration, and love that never looked past her surface. She walked away from the floor-to-ceiling windows and returned to her desk, mahogany, custom-made, pristine. Every pen aligned, every file color-coded. Chaos had no place here. Neither did weakness. A knock tapped softly on the glass door. Without looking up, she said, "Enter." Her assistant, Lila, peeked in. "Just confirming your dinner meeting with Andrew Talbot tonight." Sierra didn't sigh, but she wanted to. Confirm it. And have the car wait 10 minutes early. As Lila left, Sierra leaned back in her chair, letting the silence settle. Andrew Talbot, the hedge fund genius. Handsome. Articulate. Used to winning. Like the three before him. Cameron Liu, the tech mogul who offered her a seat on his blockchain board after 3 dates. Dr. Julian Park, the plastic surgeon who sent her photos of yachts and villas mid-consultation. Micah Valles, the literary darling whose love letters were all metaphors and no substance. And then, of course, there had been Lucas Dean, heir to an oil dynasty, who whispered that Sierra was the one after 3 glasses of Bordeaux and a Forbes cover story. Each of them thought she'd fall for status. Each tried to impress her with more money, more access, more power. None of them listened. None of them saw her. They offered her things she could already get herself. Worse, they were more interested in the idea of her than the woman she truly was. She remembered a moment with Julian, the surgeon. They'd been dining at a private rooftop, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The sky bled orange and pink, the wine flowed freely, and he'd leaned over, eyes glittering. "You don't have to work so hard, Sierra," he'd said. "A woman like you could relax. You've earned it." As if her ambition was a flaw. As if her drive was a phase. She had smiled politely and never called him again. Sierra rose from her chair and walked to her mirror. She rarely studied herself. She didn't need validation. But tonight, she looked into her own eyes, searching for something. A flicker. A sign. What was it going to take? What kind of man could see past the magazine covers, the runway shows, the billion-dollar valuation? What kind of man would care less about her name and more about her silences? She pulled her hair into a sleek knot, slid on a black coat that hugged her like a second skin, and walked out of the office. Lila handed her a leather folder. Talbot's file. His favorite wine is Bordeaux, 2006. Also, he's allergic to pistachios. Of course he was. Sierra offered a tight smile. "Thank you, Lila." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped in. As they closed behind her, she allowed herself a whisper of vulnerability, barely audible even to herself. "I just want something real." The elevator hummed downward. Below, in the lobby cafe, a man in a plain gray hoodie stood in line, waiting for coffee, unnoticed by nearly everyone. He held a tray with 4 paper cups, humming softly under his breath. He would be in her office by morning. But for now, Sierra Vale had no idea her life was about to shift. And not because of another billionaire, but because of someone who wasn't trying to impress her at all. The scent of espresso mingled with perfume and ambition in the morning air at Vale Fashion headquarters. Elevators pinged non-stop. Heels clacked across polished marble floors, and assistants scurried like stylish bees through the hive of creative chaos. Sierra Vale arrived at precisely 8:27 a.m. She always came early, never late, never flustered. She believed in claiming her day before anyone else could shape it. Her heels clicked sharply as she passed the reception desk. Her usual latte, oat milk, 2 pumps vanilla, extra hot, wasn't on her desk yet. A small irritation flickered behind her eyes. Her assistant was usually prompt. 3 minutes later, the door cracked open. A tall man in a gray crewneck sweater stepped in, holding a biodegradable tray with 5 drinks balanced perfectly. His jeans were faded but clean, and his posture was relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone in an entry-level position. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove himself, yet there was no arrogance in his expression. His eyes, however, were striking, deep-focused, intelligent. "Miss Vale," he said, stepping forward. "Your latte." Sierra blinked. She didn't recognize him. His voice was deep but gentle, with a calm cadence. He placed her drink on her desk, then set the rest on a side table. "You're not Lila," she said flatly. "No," he replied with a hint of amusement. "I'm new. Eli." "New as in hired today, or new as in this is your first and last delivery?" He smiled, unbothered by her coolness. "New as in I started yesterday. I'm interning in logistics, but the assistant team was short this morning. I offered." Sierra lifted the lid of her cup. The latte was perfect. Steam curled upward, soft and fragrant. She looked at him again, just briefly, and something strange stirred inside her. Not attraction, not yet. Curiosity. He didn't fidget. He didn't stare too long. He didn't try to compliment her or make a witty impression. He simply nodded and turned to leave. "Wait," she said, almost against her own instinct. He paused. "What's your last name?" "Kane." There was a pause in the air, a flicker of recognition in the back of her mind. Kane, a common enough name, but something about it made her pause. "All right, Kane. Let's not make this latte your peak performance," she said coolly. He gave her a lazy, respectful half-smile. "No pressure, Miss Vale." And then he left. Sierra sat back in her chair, fingers resting lightly on the cup. She watched the door for a second longer than necessary. She didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't charming. He wasn't trying. And that, somehow, was more intriguing than if he had. Later that day, as she prepared for a pitch meeting with her Paris team, Sierra caught a glimpse of Eli again. He was at the loading dock, clipboard in hand, speaking calmly to 2 disgruntled drivers who had double-booked a delivery slot. He didn't raise his voice. He listened, asked a question, made a note, and solved the problem. Efficient. Unbothered. In control. She lingered longer than she should have, watching from a side window. Most interns hovered, eager to impress. He didn't. He was simply present. That night, after her meetings, Sierra returned to her office alone. The city glittered below, and the building was quieting down. Her latte cup still sat on the corner of her desk. Cold now, but still perfect in its proportions. She picked it up and smiled to herself, just barely. "Eli Kane," she murmured. There was something about that name. Something that didn't match the coffee boy image. She didn't know yet, but the man in the faded jeans had once walked through billion-dollar boardrooms. And now he was walking through hers, invisible and unnoticed. Except, of course, by her. The city never slept, but Sierra had learned to shut it out when needed. Inside her penthouse apartment, high above Manhattan's noise and motion, she poured herself a glass of Syrah and leaned against the wide windows, watching the lights blink like quiet confessions in the dark. Her phone buzzed. Again. Another message from Andrew Talbot. It was the 3rd one tonight. First, a photo of his private jet waiting on the tarmac. Then, a voice note about a weekend in Capri. Now, a simple question. You ever get tired of being in charge? Let me take the lead. Sierra exhaled through her nose, took a long sip of wine, and let the message linger unanswered. She didn't need a private jet. She had access to 12 through her own business partnerships. And she certainly didn't need someone taking the lead, as if she were a wild horse waiting to be broken. He was the fourth man who had tried. Just another elite suitor convinced he could win her with money, ego, or the illusion of safety. They all tried, and they all failed. But even as Sierra deleted the message, a different face flickered across her mind. Eli Kane. He hadn't messaged her, hadn't tried to take the lead. In fact, he hadn't tried anything at all. That morning, she'd passed him in the corridor near the design studio. He'd been studying a logistics board, pen tucked behind his ear, his brow furrowed in thought. He hadn't noticed her at first. When he did, he gave a small nod, not rushed, not fawning, just a polite acknowledgement, as if she were a colleague. An equal, not a prize. That alone made her stop. Problem? She asked, surprising even herself. He glanced back at the board. Mild chaos. We have 2 shipments headed to the same port under conflicting codes. I'm trying to untangle the mess before it trickles up the food chain. And how's that going? She asked. He smiled, soft and self-aware. Like playing chess with a tornado. But I think I've got it. Do you have experience with logistics? She pressed. He shrugged. Some. Enough to spot a storm before it hits. She tilted her head. You talk like someone who's been around, not someone fetching coffee. I've been around, he said simply, with no follow-up. She opened her mouth to ask more, but he turned gently, excusing himself. No lingering. No flirting. No arrogant assumption that she wanted more of him than that brief exchange. He left her standing in the corridor, surprised, amused, and curious. 2 days later, another gift arrived at her office. A Cartier bracelet, delivered in a velvet box, no note. Sierra stared at it like it was an insult. She didn't even need to check the sender. It had to be Lucas Dean, the oil heir, trying once again to resurface from the ashes of her indifference. She placed the box back on the table, unopened, and pressed the intercom. Lila, send this back. With a note. If he wants to impress someone, he should start with someone who's impressed by labels. A pause. Lila's hesitant voice crackled through. Understood, Miss Vale. As Sierra leaned back in her chair, her gaze flicked to her latte, fresh, warm, already delivered. The cup had a napkin folded under it, as usual. But today there was a note. Scrawled in tidy, all-caps handwriting. Not all treasure is gold, Sierra. No signature. She stared at it. The words weren't poetic, weren't romantic, just honest, thoughtful. She picked up the cup slowly, turning the napkin in her hand. It had to be him. Eli. He'd used her name. Not Miss Vale. Not boss. Just Sierra. Her heart did something strange. A flutter, a pause, like a violin string briefly plucked by a calloused fingertip. It wasn't the sentence itself. It was the fact that it said something without trying to say everything. No flattery. No performance. Just presence. Understanding. It unsettled her in the best way. That evening, Sierra attended a gala. Another whirlwind of designer gowns, champagne fountains, and men with expensive smiles. Andrew Talbot was there. So was Micah Valles, who tried to rekindle their past with a poem he claimed to have written just that morning. She caught him reciting the same words to another heiress before dessert. She left early. The city was quieter at night, the streets slick with rain. Her driver asked if she wanted to stop anywhere. No, she murmured, then paused. Actually, yes. The office. The building was mostly dark when she arrived. The security guard nodded in surprise, but didn't ask questions. Sierra rode the elevator to her floor. It was quiet. Empty. Or so she thought. The rain started at dusk. It didn't pour, it whispered. A quiet drizzle that slipped down windows like soft sighs, dampening the city's edges, washing the neon signs into watercolor versions of themselves. Inside the Vale Fashion Building, the heat hummed gently, cocooning the few lingering employees still working late. Sierra Vale stood alone in the break lounge. Her shoes were off. Her feet ached, not from heels, but from pressure, the weight of holding everything together day after day, deal after deal. The marble beneath her was cold, grounding. The office had emptied. The silence was a rare thing in her world, and she let it settle over her like a silk shawl. She leaned against the counter, sipping chamomile tea she'd made herself. No assistants. No agenda. Just a few minutes of breathing room before the next thing demanded her name. That's when she heard the voice behind her. You drink tea when you're unraveling. She turned. Eli Kane stood a few steps away, a single folder tucked under his arm. He wasn't wearing a suit. No tie. Just a black sweater rolled at the sleeves, dark jeans, and that same unreadable look in his eyes. Sierra arched an eyebrow. I'm not unraveling. He gave a small smile. Of course not. You're always composed. Even your panic is probably well organized. She laughed, unexpected and light. The sound startled even her. He moved closer, not too close. Respectful. Comfortable. Long day, he asked. She nodded. Long month. He tilted his head. You don't have to pretend with me. The words were quiet, almost careless, but they landed with weight. No man had ever said that to her. Not like that. Not without trying to leverage it, soften it, turn it into a move. I don't pretend, she said sharply, but not unkindly. Sure you do, he said, eyes still steady. You smile when you're tired. You say I'm fine when you're clearly anything but. You let people think they understand you, then walk away before they realize they don't. Sierra stared at him, a chill crawling down her spine. How would you know? She asked, voice quieter now. He took a breath, then walked over to the window. Looked out at the city. She followed his gaze, rows of wet rooftops, cars trailing their reflections in the streets. I've watched you, he said. Not in a creepy way. Just notice things. The way you pause before answering a question you don't like. The way you double-check numbers even after your assistant says it's right. You don't trust easily. Should I? She asked. He looked at her now. Not with desire, not with pity. Just truth. No. But maybe you should let someone earn that trust. She exhaled. You talk like you've known me for years. Maybe I have, he said softly. Not you exactly. But women like you. People who lead so well that they forget how to let anyone walk beside them. That silenced her. In the distance, thunder rolled, low and tired, like the city's own pulse. Then, Eli turned fully toward her. He stepped closer, gently, closing the space with quiet conviction. Not demand. Not flirtation. Just presence. And then he said the words, the ones that reached into the marrow of her defenses and broke something open. I wanted to see what kind of man it takes to earn your heart, and what kind of woman you are when no one's trying to impress you. It was the sentence. Simple. Honest. Devastating. Sierra stood still. The air between them shifted. Something changed in her, like a key turning in a rusted lock she hadn't touched in years. He wasn't performing. He wasn't seducing. He wasn't even hoping. He was just seeing her. Not the empire. Not the image. Not the myth of Sierra Vale. Just her. Bare. Brilliant. Guarded. Lonely. Her throat felt tight. She opened her mouth to say something. Anything, but nothing came. Instead, she stared at him, heart pounding in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not even with the four before him. Because none of them had ever looked at her like that. Not as a woman to conquer, but as a soul worth knowing. I don't, she began, but the words got caught in her chest. He stepped back, gave her room. No expectations, he said, voice gentle now. You don't owe me anything. I just needed to say it. He left the mug on the counter, a second cup of tea, untouched. Then turned, walked to the door, and disappeared down the hall. Sierra stood there, staring at the place he had been. The tea in her hand had gone cold. But her heart? Warm. Awake. And, for the first time in years, open. The days after the sentence were strange. Not outwardly. Vale fashion still thrived in its usual chaos. Models rehearsed. Fabrics were flown in from Milan. Press teams scrambled to prepare for the holiday showcase. And Sierra Vale, as always, remained at the helm, graceful, unshaken, decisive. But something inside her had shifted. She moved slower through the halls now, not with hesitation, but with awareness. She really looked at people. And every time she passed the logistics bay, or the coffee station, or the lower-level conference rooms, she found herself searching. For him. Eli Kane. He hadn't spoken to her since that night. No follow-up message. No awkward glances. Just distance. Not avoidance. Not punishment. Just space. As if he'd dropped something sacred at her feet, then stepped back to let her decide what to do with it. She both admired and resented it. Men usually chased her. Not out of love, but conquest. They didn't leave space. They filled it, invaded it, tried to own it. Eli had done the opposite. And it unnerved her more than she expected. It was Friday evening when she finally saw him again, back where it all began, in the break lounge. The floor was mostly empty. Sierra had stayed late reviewing international accounts, her mind restless. Eli was leaning over a table, unpacking boxes of branded gift mugs for an upcoming employee appreciation campaign. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, veins visible beneath his skin. Efficient. Quiet. Present. Again. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. He sensed her before she spoke. "Still not trying to impress me?" she asked lightly. He turned slow and measured. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "Would it help if I said I'm doing all this just for you?" "No," she said, walking in. "That would ruin everything." He nodded once. "Didn't think so." They stood across from each other now, only the table between them. The boxes were half empty. One mug sat in the middle, still wrapped in bubble paper. "You've been quiet," she said. "You've had things to think about," he replied. She narrowed her eyes. "You're not an intern." He didn't answer right away. She stepped closer. Her voice was softer now. "You knew exactly what to say. You've never been overwhelmed in a room, not once. You understand high-level operations, legal risk, and shipping law. I've seen your notes. You talk to suppliers like they're partners, not just numbers." Still, he didn't interrupt. "You're playing a role," she continued. "But it's not coffee boy." Now his gaze met hers fully, calm, direct. "Not defensive." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." She folded her arms. "So who are you really?" He took a slow breath, then walked around the table, not towards her, but towards the small couch in the corner of the lounge. He sat down, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. When he spoke, there was no drama, no reveal, just truth. "My name is Elijah Kane. My grandfather started Kane Industries 70 years ago. My father expanded it into global real estate. And he gave a dry chuckle. I was supposed to run it all." Sierra didn't move. He continued. "But I couldn't breathe in those rooms. Everyone wanted something. Everyone was watching, waiting. I lost track of who I was, and worse, I stopped asking. So last year I stepped down. Quietly. No announcement. I pulled money out, put on jeans, and started walking through the world like a person again." "And you walked into my company," she said, voice low. "I watched your interviews," he admitted. "I read how people described you, cold, impossible, unapproachable. I didn't believe them. I saw the fire in your eyes when you talked about creating something true. You infiltrated my company," she said, but there was no anger in her tone. Only disbelief. Wonder. "No," he said, and looked her in the eye. "I asked for a low-level spot. I wanted to see the culture. Your people. Your standards. I needed to know if the leader behind all that power still had a soul." "And," she whispered. "You do," he said. "And it's terrifying." The silence between them deepened. Not heavy. Not hostile. Just true. Sierra moved to sit across from him, her knees almost brushing his. Her eyes were glassy, not with tears, but with the strain of trying to hold everything together. "You could have played me," she said. "I could have," he admitted. "But you didn't." "No," he said simply. "I didn't want your defenses. I wanted your real. That meant I had to show you mine first." She leaned back, her head tilted toward the ceiling, eyes closed for a breath. "You're worth billions," she said finally. "I'm worth nothing," he replied, If I have to lie to be seen. She looked at him again, really looked. No facade, no mask, no walls. Just a man. Honest. Grounded. Brave. Something inside her surrendered. Not to him. To herself. To the possibility that this was what she'd been waiting for all along. Not another man in a tower of glass and gold, but someone who would sit on the floor with her. Someone who saw the cracks and called them beautiful. Someone who made her feel. I'm not easy, she said, voice low. I know, he answered. I'm not asking for easy. I don't fall fast. I'll wait. She let out a soft, uncertain laugh. You don't even know what I'm like in a relationship. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again, hands loosely clasped. I don't need to know everything right now, he said. I just want to be where you are. And in that moment, she believed him. Not because of his name. Not because of his fortune. But because he hadn't tried to possess her. He had simply chosen to show up. And sometimes, showing up was the loudest kind of love. Snow fell quietly the morning she said yes. Not to a proposal. Not to a promise. But to possibility. To a moment. To a man. To herself. Sierra Vale stood on the rooftop of her building, wrapped in a long camel coat, the city stretching wide beneath her like a sleeping beast. The skyline shimmered with frost. The wind was soft. The rooftop garden, her sanctuary, had been dusted in white, the benches and planters resting under a thin blanket of snow. She wasn't alone. Eli stood at the far end of the rooftop, hands in his coat pockets, watching the world the way he always did. Quietly, patiently, as if waiting for it to tell him something worth hearing. He turned when she stepped closer. You came, he said softly. I told Lila to cancel my morning, she replied. A pause. He gave her a small, crooked smile. World must be ending. She didn't smile back. Not yet. Her eyes searched his. Not for answers, but for consistency. For the same man who'd stood beside her without needing to outshine her. I'm not used to this, she said, stepping closer. Letting someone in. Not performing. Not being the boss in the room. You don't have to be anything with me, he said. Her breath caught. Say that again, she whispered. He didn't ask why. You don't have to be anything with me, he repeated, slower this time. You're already enough. Her eyes closed. Just for a second. As if the words had struck a nerve long hidden beneath skin and steel. No man had ever said that without a condition. Without a follow-up. Not if you love me. Not if you tone it down. Not if you give me more. Just you're enough. She opened her eyes. The city stretched behind him, wind brushing the edges of his hair, the morning quiet except for her breath and his heartbeat, steady even from where she stood. And then she said it, the words that had taken years to find their way past the fortress of her mouth. I like you, she said, in a way that's dangerous, and unfamiliar, and beautiful, and I don't want it to go away. He said nothing at first. Just let the words settle. Let her own truth sit in the space between them. Then he took a step closer. 1 foot in the snow, no urgency, no pressure. Just presence. Then let's not let it go away, he said. A beat. Another breath. And she laughed, soft, almost shy. The sound warmed the cold air. God, she whispered, half to herself. You're not even trying, are you? No, he said, with a light in his eyes. I'm just here. Weeks passed. And something in Sierra softened. Not her fire. Not her ambition. But the edges. The parts of her that once recoiled at touch, at hope, at the idea that someone could want her without needing to change her. She and Eli began to move like a private rhythm, a melody they didn't share with the world. No headlines. No interviews. No curated Instagram moments. Just walks. Rooftop dinners. Quiet afternoons in design studios where he sat beside her as she flipped through fabric samples, listening even when she didn't speak. They still argued about business, about boundaries, about trust. But it was different. Eli never raised his voice, and Sierra never ran. Instead, they stayed, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. 3 months later, he brought her coffee on a Sunday morning. No napkin note this time. Just a simple cup, warm and right, and a small velvet box in his other hand. Her breath caught, but he shook his head. "Not that kind of box," he said gently. She opened it. Inside was a ring. Not a diamond. Not even a gemstone. Just a thin silver band etched with a single sentence on the inside. "Not all treasure is gold." She looked up at him, heart thudding. "I don't want your empire," he said, repeating what he'd told her before. "I just want your mornings, your moods, your truth. I want your silence when words don't work, and your laugh when it breaks through anyway." Her eyes stung, not from surprise, but from recognition. This was the man who had sat with her in her rawest hours, who had asked for nothing but her, who had never tried to impress her, but who had ended up impressing her the most. She took the ring, slid it onto her right hand. "No vows?" she asked. He smiled. "Only one." She waited. He stepped closer, lifted her hand, and kissed her knuckles with quiet reverence. "I vow to never love the idea of you more than the reality of you." And just like that, Sierra Vale, who had once sworn that no man could win her heart, realized that her heart had never needed winning. It had only needed to be understood. And finally, after all the noise, all the suitors, all the pressure, someone had spoken one sentence, seen one truth, and stayed long enough to let love grow. 6 months later, the city had changed its coat again. Spring painted everything in softer tones. Cherry blossoms burst through iron fences. Cafe patios were full of slow laughter and clinking glasses, and Central Park swayed with life. The world had thawed. And so had Sierra. She sat in the back seat of a sleek town car, but this time, her expression wasn't guarded or bored. She wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't reviewing files. She was smiling, soft, reflective, absent-minded, as she stared out the window, a thin silver ring still on her right hand. "Central Park, East Meadow entrance," she told the driver. Her voice, once sharp and calculated, now carried something gentler. Something earned. Eli was already there, sitting on a bench with 2 coffees and a box of plain bagels. No napkins. No notes. Just presence, as always. Sierra walked toward him, heels traded for clean white sneakers. Her sunglasses framed her face, but didn't hide the flicker of joy in her eyes when she saw him. "You didn't bring the fancy mugs?" she teased. "Didn't want to ruin the charm," he said, handing her a coffee. "Besides, this is our spot now." "Our spot," she repeated, sitting beside him. "I like how that sounds." They sat in silence for a while, watching joggers pass, birds flit low over the grass, children chasing bubbles. "I've been thinking," she said after a moment. "What would have happened if I never noticed you?" "You would have kept building your empire," he replied. "And I would have quietly admired you from the background." "That sounds tragic," she murmured. He looked at her, smiling slightly. "Maybe. Or maybe we both just found the right chapter when we were finally ready to read it." She turned toward him, touched by how simple he made things. Not simplistic, just uncluttered. Honest. "I didn't think I was capable of this," she admitted. "Of sharing my life. Letting someone this close. It's terrifying." He didn't flinch. "That's because it's real. And real things always come with risk." Sierra looked down at the silver ring. The inscription still shone, even in daylight. "Not all treasure is gold. I used to think that I needed someone who could match me," she said slowly. "But I think what I really needed was someone who didn't compete. Someone who didn't need anything from me, except the truth." Eli leaned back, arm brushing hers. "You gave it," he said simply. She smiled. Not the tight, professional smile she wore in press photos, but the one she gave when no one was watching. "Do you ever miss that world?" she asked. "The boardrooms. The title. The legacy." He thought about it, then shook his head. "I used to think legacy was what I left behind," he said. "Now I think it's who I build with." Sierra rested her head gently on his shoulder. It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't need to be. For once in her life, she wasn't trying to control the moment. She was just in it, breathing, becoming. And beside her sat the man who had taught her the most valuable lesson of all. That love didn't have to be loud enough to change everything. That gold may shine, but it's the quiet treasure that stays. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.